the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
And we're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets.
Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
And we're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets.
Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
And we're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right.
Salt of the streets.
Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's podcast.
Salt of the streets.
Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left.
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that?
Action. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Beertime with BigBird, the fun Friday night live stream show right here out of the Salt of the Street studio. I am that big bird looking fellow they call Colin. And of course, we almost had an emergency here. I was watching the countdown clock, and I'm like sitting there looking around. Okay, I got everything. I don't have a beer. Where's my beer? Why don't I have a beer? Run to the fridge and get the beer. So we have a beer. It's right here. This is the illustrious Seven Seas Brewing Double IPA. It's one of my old favorite beers from a local-ish, to me, it's probably about an hour away, brewery. Does just fantastic beer. They originally got me with their black IPA. It was the first time I ever had a black IPA. It was fantastic. But enough about that. We have a beer and we have a show to do. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be talking about two things. I was going to originally just kind of focus on the energy situation over in Europe, relating to Ukraine, Russia, the whole 9 yards last week. We mentioned it on the show last week. If you haven't watched it, you should do that, because I don't know why you're not doing that. Episode 132, Russia had to cut the tap off of Europe, and there was no more liquid natural gas flowing into Europe, which is their main source of energy. So we're going to get into some of that stuff, some of the fallout, some of the stuff they're dealing with, some similar situations in California going down right now, minus this is basically all self-imposed on California's side. It's not an externality like Russia cutting off the taps. But then I really started to think about it. This is supposed to be a show that really is about me discussing one of the issues of the week that has just been kind of irking at me, and it would be unfair of me not to bring up this concept of quiet quitting, and particularly around a monologue that came from Crystal Ball over there on Breaking Points this week. It really broke me, and so it would just not be okay if we didn't cover that. But first, we have to drink some beer. So we got our 7 Seas double IPA. We're going to try to pour us a glass here without spilling all over the computer or knocking my microphone around and just the whole nine, or just overfilling this thing like crazy. 'Cause as per our usual arrangement, I did. I even turned the glass. I mean, I turned everything. I don't understand. This doesn't happen to me in real life. I swear. I don't do this every time. It's only on the show. Only on the show. Wink, wink. That was a really sad wink. So we got a couple videos we're going to watch today. We're going to start off talking about energy. I think we can hit that good and fast. Just kind of a nice generalized update on what's going on there, and the EU's response to what's going on. It's very, very impactful for the people on the actual ground. It's not a good situation. We hear stories of people's energy bills going up 3, 4, 5, 10 times what their usual amounts are, and we'll kind of discover why that might be the situation in some cases. So let's just go ahead and dive right. Actually, let's take some beer first. Cheers. The dog just sneezed underneath. She's probably licking up all the little bit that I spilled. Oh, that's a good double IPA. Look at the color of that thing. A regular IPA, man, you can get real nice straw yellow, to relatively clear, but with a double IPA, you're really doubling up the amount of grain going into that thing, and so it gets real dark real fast, real caramely, if you will. But it always kind of chills out a little bit on the immediate punch of the hops, and you get it mostly on the back end. And actually, funny story about this particular IPA. It is now known as just their double IPA. There's nothing special about it anymore. They just call it the 7 Seas double IPA. It used to have a different name. I believe there were some legal troubles they got into with another beer that had the same name, and I think they got there first. But it used to be called Balls Deep, BALLZ Deep, and they always had cool cans with big weighted, the old school leg shackle, leg irons with the big weighted balls on them that you see, and then the idea is 7 Seas sailors and all that stuff. Whenever somebody went overboard, you strap one of those to their leg and push them over, and they ain't coming back up. But it's been a couple of years now, at least, that Balls Deep has not been around, and it's just double IPA. So we're going to need some of that before we dive into this first video here. So if you've got one, crack it open, enjoy it with me as we listen to the president of the EU talk about what they're going to do regarding the energy crisis thus far.
Mentioning that we see there's a global scarcity of energy.
Global scarcity.
So whatever we do, one thing is for sure, we have to save electricity, but we have to save it in a smart way.
Save it.
If you look at the costs of electricity, there are peak demands. And this is what is expensive, because in these peak demands, the expensive gas comes into the market. So what we have to do is flatten the curve
Flatten the curve.
and avoid the peak demands. We will propose a mandatory target for reducing electricity use at peak hours, and we will work very closely with the member states to achieve this.
Boom, there we go. Okay, so if you couldn't quite understand that, basically, I don't know why they're bringing up this terminology again. This is all very, very reminiscent of COVID, which is it's not a good look. It's not a good sound when you hear this flatten the curve business again. But peak hours is basically when people are coming home from work. They're going to be home for the evening. They're going to be cooking. They're going to be cleaning. They're going to be doing all these things, during the week. And so energy consumption spikes at certain periods of time. And so they're looking to impose mandatory reductions to peak hour electricity usage throughout the entirety of the EU. So this is most of Europe at this point. And it's going to come in different forms, obviously, but every one of the member states, if you will, within the EU, or all the various countries that make up the EU, they're going to have to implement these in certain ways. But the way they say it, we're going to recommend required or mandatory reductions during peak hours so that they can flatten the curve. Again, hackles go up. I don't know why they're using that terminology, flatten the curve. Again, it's very... my authoritarian, hackles go up whenever I hear that. It makes me slightly uncomfortable, and I feel like it should probably make you slightly uncomfortable too. Now, how did we end up in this situation where the state is now going to have to tell you, our friends in Europe anyways, that you can't use certain amount of electricity during certain times of the day? It's because we will bring up this chart here. This is actually from the EU, and it is a breakout of what percentage of their energy is green energy. And it doesn't exactly break it down per type, which we will get into when we talk about California. But roughly speaking, at EU level, the share of renewable energy in energy consumption increased steadily from 9.6% in 2004 to 22.1% in 2020, and has only increased since then. Let's see, they have a targeted amount for 2030, as if there would be an agenda to get to 2030, of 32%. That's what they were aiming at. And the rest comes from non-renewable energy. So we're talking, as far as European standards, we're talking about nuclear and coal and oil. The vast majority of it is coming from liquid natural gas, which comes directly from Russia. And that's how we end up in that situation there. Russia has turned the taps off, and obviously we've talked about this on the last show, like I said. Another plug to go. Make sure you watch that if you haven't checked it out. They're not coming back on anytime soon. Why would Russia do that? They have all the leverage. And with only less than 30% of your energy grid coming from your own renewables, you have to look to your fossil fuels for those. And if you have systematically shut those down over the preceding years, you're kind of left high and dry at this point, and left with very, very limited options, we'll say. And here we are. Now, this is what our friends over in Europe are going to have to be dealing with, which doesn't seem great with winter coming. Winter's coming, just like Game of Thrones says, and it's going to get cold up there, and we will see what happens and hope for the best. There are talks right now. I saw an article today about trying to pressure some of the Middle Eastern countries to get extra oil up there. It's a thing. There's obviously the buy oil from China route, which a lot of the U.S. is doing right now with... we used to buy, I forget, it was like 12% or 20% of our oil came from China, or from Russia. But what's happening now is Russia selling the oil to China, not in the U.S. dollar, I might add, and then China's putting a markup on it, turning around and reselling it to us again. So this is a route I would imagine they might be able to go, but I don't know if you're ever you can't get the volumes you can just from straight, Nord Stream 1 pipeline. You can't get the same volume coming from that. So now let's bring it to California. I think it was like Wednesday this week, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, decided to put a pullover sweater on and do a nice little video to his residents of the state, talking about the possibilities of rolling blackouts and that they would be happening, and that you need to once again reduce the curve of your energy consumption during peak hours. And he gave some ideas about, cooling your house in the morning instead of in the evening. That way, pre-cooling your house, which, if you got really good insulation, is a thing that definitely would help, I guess. And then, which really all it does is turn everybody's, peak consumption to a different time period. But at least at that point, it's not as hot out. And also not using large appliances or not charging your electric vehicle, which is just so funny, because there's too much strain on the power grid. Now, why is there too much strain on the power grid in the United States of America, in California? Well, every state has a different way of energizing their state grid. Every state has a different methodology to do that. We saw an issue with Texas a few years ago during a big blizzard, where their form of state management, if you will, of the electric grid, because it is not a state-run management grid in Texas, it's a private industry with quotations, because it's heavily regulated. They had some issues trying to maintain the power grid. And, let's not sugarcoat it, some people died. It was really cold. So we're going to take a look at California's energy grid and what that looks like. So as of right now, this was last year, I guess. I would imagine the numbers haven't changed that much since. But the major, look at that. We don't have much coal. We got 0.2% of coal in California generation. We've got natural gas. Over half of their grid is powered by natural gas. Not a green energy. Oil, 0. Other, waste heat and petroleum coke, 0.2%. Nuclear power, 8.5%. I believe that is off of the single last nuclear reactor that they had running at the time. Large hydro, they are down to 6.2% because the droughts and everything have lowered the amount of power generated through hydro. So that leaves 65.2% of their thermal and non-renewable energies coming from non-green energy. Now, as far as the renewables, aka the greenies, we're sitting around 34.8%. So we have from biomass 2.8, geothermal 5.7, 1.3 from small hydro, solar 17.1. That's their largest green energy source in California, 17.1%, and 7.8% from wind. So why do you have an energy issue in California? Because 1/3 of your grid is run by green energy, that while you're shutting down your liquid natural gas plants and reducing all of your carbon-based energy sources. That, and they're also in the middle of a heat wave, so that's a thing that happens every year in California. And as they have stepped away from the non-green energies and relied more on their 1/3 to power their entire grid, it's obviously being strained, and that led to wonderful memes like this one. When you're not able to power your Tesla because either you're involved in a rolling blackout like are currently going on right now, or you've just been asked to not plug it in, we have a generator powering a Tesla. Again, generator, Tesla, fantastic. Now, why is this happening? Because this is the truth about your electric car, right here. This is like the most perfect picture to really get a grasp on what is actually happening with this push towards. We talked about electric cars in the last beer show. This is what that means. It means that you have a a non-green friendly energy situation powering your electric car. It's basically the same thing as this. It's just it's a much more concentrated scale. This is way less efficient than this. So there you go. That's where we're at on the energy front. It's obviously not good, especially for those people in Europe. In California, it's kind of laughable because this is the United States. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. We have wonderful technologies that we could bring online if we wanted to, but we don't. For whatever reason, our morals are more important than our perceived morals are more important than the reality of the situation. And so people are left to try to charge their electric cars with diesel generators. Awesome. Now let's get into the main meat and potatoes today. The stuff that just really drove me nuts today. And we got to preface this a little bit because we're going to play a clip from the show Breaking Points on YouTube, also available as a podcast. And it's a show that Donovan and I have talked regularly about on the show before, and we've written about it. I mean, we got a real kind of situation with these people. They just really bother us, especially these days. They made a really big, if you're unfamiliar, they made a kind of a big splash in the independent media scene. They used to work at a publication called The Hill, and they hosted a show there called Rising, which is still running. It's just got different hosts now, and for the time, I think they did a pretty good job for what they were. They had two guests. One of them, his name is Sagar and Jetty, and the other one is Crystal Ball. Sagar represents more of a conservative side. He wears a suit, and he calls himself a conservative. And you have Crystal Ball, who is a progressive, and kind of, pushes that narrative along. They went independent a while back and created their own show called Breaking Points. And like I said, we've talked at no shortage about the nonsense that comes out of their mouths and kind of the stepping away of their once morals that they were so proud of back on Rising and in the early days of Breaking Points. But with success comes, freedom to kind of, shill for yourself or your side. And the other day, I think this was on Thursday's show, Crystal did a monologue, her own special segment, describing kind of the breakthroughs and the revolution going on in the worker sector, as she would call it, the sector of workers and unions. I don't know what a worker is, and this is what we need to just lay out from the get-go. I don't understand what a worker is. I understand people have companies and they run companies and they hire employees, and those employees could be called a worker if you would like. But I don't get the feeling that they use this term worker, and it seems like such a catch-all, and I don't appreciate it, because whenever they talk about workers, I know they're not talking about me, because I have never once felt myself in a position throughout any of my jobs in my career paths. I've been a business owner and a manager. I've been a low man on the totem pole. I've been, a guy in a ditch with a shovel. I've been a person on a factory assembly line. All sorts of things. I've never once felt or identified with this title that they use called a worker. I don't get it. I don't understand what they're talking about here. My assumption from the context that is given, and we will get into later as the clip plays, I believe their definition of a worker is somebody that works somewhat of a white-collar job. I'm thinking like an office worker in today's world, the very recent new world of remote work, somebody that works on a laptop from home, or only works at a location in some kind of partial distant capacity, or somebody that works like in an office in a cubicle, or, does something that doesn't necessarily work with their hands. We'll put it that way. If you don't work with your hands, this is the worker I think they are describing, because otherwise not a lot of this really makes sense to me. we're going to start off by reading a piece from Gallup, the polling company, because they recently put out a new poll describing this, taking a look at this concept of what we call quiet quitting. It's a new term that I'm fairly sure came from TikTok and the Gen Zers, because they are 100%, they're the main driving force of this concept of quiet quitting. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. We're going to get into it and get through it as quick as possible, because Timcast IRL is about to start, and my boy Dave Smith, I believe, is on tonight, and so we're going to hurry up and get to that. So let's jump over to this Gallup poll right now. If I can find the button. There we go. Is quiet quitting real? Now, this is actually from the polling people. Let's remember this. Quiet quitters make up at least 50% of the U.S. workforce. Probably more, Gallup finds. The trend toward quiet quitting, the idea spreading virtually on social media that millions of people are not going above and beyond at work and just meeting their job description, could get worse. This is a problem because most jobs today require some level of extra effort to collaborate with coworkers and meet customer needs. U.S. employee engagement took another step backward during the second quarter of 2022. That was this most recent quarter that stepped back, or that we just finished back in July. With the proportion of engaged workers remaining at 32%, with the proportion of actively disengaged increasing to 18%. The ratio of engaged to actively disengaged employees is now 1.8 to 1, the lowest in almost a decade. That is the lowest point, which we'll get into later, was during the Great Recession, 2007, 2008, which we have not quite gotten to yet. The drop in engagement began in the second half of 2021, aka peak pandemic style, and was concurrent with the rise in job resignations. Managers, among others, experienced the greatest drop. The overall decline was especially related to the clarity of expectations, opportunities to learn and grow, feeling cared about, and a connection to the organization's mission or purpose, signaling a growing disconnection between employees and their employers. Oh, I always forget this beer show. We got to keep drinking. So we got a chart here that shows. You'll see right here the worst point in time, the most actively disengaged at 20%, 2007, 2008, and engaged being at 30 and 29%. Some of the lowest when you think about their relationship as far as being closest together. Now we're sitting at here currently 32% engaged, 18% actively disengaged. So not quite as bad as the Great Recession, but we root on. Many quiet quitters fit Gallup's definition of being, quote, not engaged at work. People who do the minimum required and are psychologically detached from their job. This describes half of the U.S. workforce. We'll finish up and then we'll pontificate a little bit more. Everyone else is either engaged 32% or actively disengaged 18%. The latter are loud quitters. Actively disengaged employees tend to have most of their workplace needs unmet and spread their dissatisfaction. Nobody likes those people. Nobody likes those people. Nobody wants to be around a loud quitter because they still have a job. They're still there, but they just constantly bring everybody else down. It's not a good thing. They have been the most vocal in TikTok. Of course, TikTok posts that have generated millions of views and comments. Most employees who are not engaged or actively disengaged are already looking for another job. As you should. If you are quiet quitting a job, you should be looking for another job. Because that's no way to live life, man. You shouldn't be you shouldn't feel like a cog in a machine. If you want to be a cog, go do cog shit. It's driving me nuts. So one of the biggest problems I had with this poll, right? And what's the term I want to use? Either way, I looked high and low through Gallup to try to find their methodology for this stuff, because a lot of these things like engaged, do you consider yourself not engaged, engaged, you know, what do they say here? Fitting Gallup's definition of being not engaged. What is your definition of this? I need to know the parameters of this poll that you took, because I don't understand what it is you're talking about. You're talking about feelings at this point. It is so subjective. I don't know how much weight this entire poll has. But as we will continue, we will let Crystal start off with her view around quiet quitting, and we'll pause and we'll talk and we'll do the things as she goes along. But I remember what I said about defining what a worker is, because I have a feeling if you listen to this describes two people that work in offices and people that work in a union.
Quiet quitting is an emphatic rejection of the grind set or hustle mentality, and it's an emphatic rejection of the long-standing Puritan work ethic culture that has been a core part of American capitalist
at the wrong time.
About one more labor trend that we really haven't talked about much here, and that is called quiet quitting. Now, quiet quitting is when workers stay in their jobs, but kind of do the minimum of what is required. Here's how it was explained in one viral TikTok.
I recently learned about this term called quiet quitting, where you're not outright quitting your job, but you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You're still performing your duties, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. The reality is it's not, and your worth as a person is not defined by your labor.
Now let's pause it right there, because I believe that 100%. If there's a lot of jobs that you can go get that will give you a paycheck, and essentially all you got to do is go there, do whatever it is that you were hired to do, and then go live your life. There is definitely a hustle mentality that goes around just America in general. That's the capitalist society. Is there is going to be a group of people that will want to always strive to do more, want to try to stand out in front of people, and want to try to climb that ladder. There is absolutely nothing wrong with getting a job and then just doing your fucking job. I don't understand why you would feel this quiet quitting. Why can't you just say, yeah, I show up and I do my job and then I go home and then I go live my life? Work is not my life. I do that now. I didn't used to. When you own a company, it's totally different. You can't necessarily do that if you're a business owner. But if you're an employee, you go to work, you do your job, and then you go home. I don't understand. I feel completely disconnected from this. I don't. Is this purely like a corporate America? You're a cog in a machine. What is it that keeps somebody from going out and finding something else that they don't think is soul crushing? Why would they? Is there that much pressure on them to perform extra? Are they? If you are quiet quitting, and you're not getting fired from your job, is there anything inherently wrong with that? I just feel like that's probably just called doing your job and going home and not making your life about your job. Maybe that's me. Crystal, carry on.
You are not your job. That is the core ethos here. Quiet quitting is an emphatic rejection of the grind set or hustle mentality, and it's an emphatic rejection of the long-standing Puritan work ethic culture that has been a core part of American capitalist indoctrination since basically the Industrial Revolution.
That was a mouthful of progressive terms. The Puritan work ethic indoctrination. Capitalistic. Don't forget we got to throw in capitalism in there too. Well, yes. Okay. So there is I don't know why she assigns this purely to Puritanism. That's a weird thing. But yes, Puritanism, if I recall, I'm not a religious scholar, but the Puritans generally found meaning in work. And so, you basically had to constantly work all the time. And that's how you found meaning in life. And that's how you got closer to God and so on and so forth, was through work. That was it. Mind you, this is also at a time period when people had moved over to a brand new, land across an ocean and literally had to go out and chop wood and hunt and try to grow food and to fish and build houses and build tools and do all this stuff. Otherwise they died. So it kind of went hand in hand with what their religion was prescribing. But the hustle culture, we have to touch on this, because hustle culture is not a bad thing. It's not mandated by anybody. If you have a job where you're expected to do more than you were hired to do, you should fucking leave that job. Because that's not what you were hired to do. You brought your labor to this job to do a thing, and now they want more from you. And if you are willing to offer that and they are unwilling to compensate you, then you go somewhere else where your labor will match what you think it's worth. That's what you need to do. It's not, I know it sounds really easy. Totally understand. Trust me, I totally understand. Nothing that's worth doing is easy. Period. If this is your mentality, you need to do something better for yourself and get another job somewhere where you will feel much better to be. But hustle culture itself is not a problem. Hustle culture is how people can rise above their current means. It's if you are not willing to put in the effort to try to rise above your current station, why would you rise above your current station? Nobody should just give you that. You're not just going to get that on a silver platter. That is not how meritocracy works. That is not how any of this shit works. If you want something, you go get it. You make it happen. If you want something, you work for it. You don't work by showing up to your 9-to-5 job and sitting there and quiet quitting all day. That's not working for something. That's it. Anyway, carry on, Crystal.
Now, the old story went like this. You work hard, you play by the rules, and you'll be able to achieve the American dream of middle-class prosperity. That story, of course, was reliant on a social contract between workers, government, and corporations that said your productivity would be rewarded with stability and basic prosperity.
And this is also decades and decades and decades old. This started when Woodrow Wilson, and around that time period, it was a different America altogether. This was a totally different economic situation. The entire makeup of the country's capitalistic enterprise was completely different. And yes, it was, houses didn't cost $750,000. They cost like $15,000 to $30,000. And yeah, generally speaking, back then, if you got a job, you worked at a factory or something akin to that made a product, and you stayed there for 30 to 40 years, and then you retired, and it was a different life. The system does not work that way anymore. There is no guarantee that if you just go get a job, you're going to be able to achieve the American dream. I would argue there's 1.5 million reasons for that, most of them being government intervention, Crystal. But alas, we'll carry on, because I believe the point she's making is totally nonsensical. It doesn't apply to today. That is not a reality of today's world.
Healthcare, education, a modest home, a yearly family vacation.
Not a deal.
Your loyalty to the company would be reciprocated so that you could depend on a predictable income if you just put in the time and the work.
It was
now,
back in the
pandemic
30s, 40s,
put
and
into
50s.
sharp relief just how corporate bosses actually feel about their workers these days. They were happy to fire them or to risk their lives while calling them essential, all in the name of profit.
Pause button, because, okay, first of all, dead giveaway. She's talking your corporate bosses. So she's not talking about me. And she's probably not talking about you. If you are one of those people and your corporate bosses, which is basically a board of executive who makes 7 to 8 figures a year, that you're a cog in a machine. And if you don't want to be a cog in a machine, you need to get the fuck out of the machine. That's how that works. If you want to be a cog, go do cog shit. Shout out Larry Dixon. This is not the way to do this. No amount of hustle mentality, unless you're a cutthroat, backstabbing business type, you're not going to get anywhere in that place unless you enjoy what it is that you do, and you don't have any higher, if you're not reaching for a higher level, it's not a bad gig for a lot of people. But if you want something more, that ain't going to do it. That you're in a business environment that is not friendly to what you want it to be. If you're talking about, we'll just let her, we'll let her carry on. But I believe at this point, her mentality is that if you're working for Amazon, if you're working for Walmart, if you're working for one of the giant megacorps, probably try to go do something else. because we're not those people. If you work with your hands, you're not one of these people.
Many workers were forced out of their normal routines through layoffs or remote work, and in the process of having their lives turned upside down, they found a silver lining in the realization that they were in fact so much more than their jobs, and that
yes, we have to hit this too because I totally forgot. What she's talking about here, I keep forgetting to switch scene. I'm sorry, guys. This is still new. What she's talking about is also these workers, again, that lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And you have to remember your business didn't do that. Your corporate bosses didn't want to do that. They did it because the government threatened them. And they said, everyone has to not work except for the people that we, the government, we, the state, deem essential. Your bosses didn't do that. If they did that, they were fighting so that you could stay employed. You didn't have to. I mean, there were a lot of people that left shitty jobs and got their double unemployment check from the state and the federal government and made more. A lot of people did that because they would rather not work their shitty job, which most of the essential jobs were shitty jobs. Unless you were a hardcore, construction industries were deemed essential. There was all sorts of niche little markets that were deemed essential by the man at that point. But you have to remember, if you were one of these people that were forced to work remote, forced, bro. You don't tell me you were forced to work remote and you don't like not going to the office. Come on now. I understand. But it was not your employer's decision to do that. That was forced on them by the state, period.
life, in fact, was so much more than just work. So in addition to unionizing or quitting or embracing permanent remote work, some workers just decided they were going to change their orientation to their job by quiet quitting. So how real is this phenomenon exactly? According to a new Gallup poll, it is real and it's actually quite widespread. At least half of American workers are quiet quitting. In fact,
is this it? Is this really what it is? It's just they just decided to come up with a new term for just going to work and doing your job and then going home and not making work your entire life? Because that seems healthy to me. If quiet quitting is just the new thing Gen Zers are calling just showing up to work and not making your entire life focused around work, what is going on here? Maybe I'm just really confused about this, and now I'm just the old guy that gets angry because I'm confused. Because these people make up these new terms like quiet quitting, and it just tells me that you're showing up and doing the absolute bare minimum just to stay employed, and I don't like to work because life is so much more than that. Maybe it's just an attitude. It's an attitudinal adjustment, and that's about it. I don't understand this.
Only 32% of workers said that they are engaged in their jobs. That number's been declining for 2 years now. At the same time, the percent who say they are actively disengaged has been ticking up and now stands at 18%. That leaves a broad swath in the middle who are sort of engaged in their jobs, many of whom, again, according to Gallup, are quiet quitting. Even more revealing, quiet quitting is an extremely age-dependent phenomenon. So Gen Z is very pro-quiet quitting. Boomers and silent generations still, by and large, fully embrace the Protestant work ethic grind set.
The Protestant work ethic grind set. Man, I just got to say, man. No. It's okay to want to work hard. It's not a big deal. If you want to work hard, good for you. You're probably going to do okay. If you don't want to work hard, thanks to being 2022 and all this remote and all this, you don't have to. You can get away with it. You can get a remote job that works for some giant mega corporation where you're just a number and nobody cares about you because all you need to do is clock in and do 6 hours from your couch. That's fine. I got no problem with that, man. I got no problem at all. For one, I think it's good because you could probably, if you have the mindset, you can take better advantage of your time to do something that you really, really want to and just use that thing to pay the bills. That seems cool to me. I don't understand how this is a pejorative thing. This could be used as a good deal. Why do you got to call it something as passive aggressive as quiet quitting? And use it as some form of attack vector against corporate America and the boss class.
According to a new YouGov poll, 45% of Americans say they agree with the idea that a worker should only do the work they're paid for, no more, no less, as opposed to 44% who say they disagree with that sentiment. But when you dig into the crosstabs, it really gets interesting. So 65% of workers under the age of 30 think that those workers should just do what they're paid for, as opposed to just 24% who disagree with that sentiment. Now, among the oldest respondents, those who are 65 plus, the numbers are almost exactly reversed.
Okay. And basically, she goes on from there, goes on for another couple minutes, but it's essentially the same type of thing. A lot of the olds don't agree with it. Maybe I'm just one of the olds. Actually, I don't think I am anymore. I've listened to this clip multiple times, and I've read a few articles about the articles are all trash. Everything coming from the corporate press on this is just total trash, and it's meant to degrade the working man, quote unquote. No sexism involved there. As somebody it's in a you're stuck in a rat race, and you're losing. You're running this ever losing race against your corporate bosses and these people that are always trying to take advantage of you just so they can make money and become more wealthy and take advantage of you. When I know it absolutely for a fact that is not the case. If you work in a corporate machine, yes, that's the way it works. That's how corporations work, which is why you probably shouldn't work for them unless you're okay with showing up to work and doing exactly what you're paid for and moving on. If that's what you want to do it. If you want to be a cog, go do cog shit. Wild that this is like the mentality, the idea that like you work this job and you're expected to do all these things that I don't get paid for. Well, then don't do them. It seems like a no-brainer to me, man. It really does. The mindset behind this is frustrating. It's so frustrating. Know your worth. Get a job that pays you for what you're worth, or prove to them that you're worth this. And if you are not getting paid what you're worth, go somewhere where they will pay you for what you're worth. If you want to be a cog, go do cog shit. That's today's Beer Time with Big Bird. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. It's been fantastic. Happy Friday. Cheers, everybody. Happy Friday. Go enjoy the weekend. We're doing it up big. We will see you all next weekend, right here on Salted Streets YouTube at noon. Will be episode 133. We're going to change that from a 2 to a 3. We're going to be back in studio. We're going to be having some great things. Literally haven't discussed what we're going to talk about yet. But hey, it's 2022 and the news cycle is basically day to day. We get new shit added almost every hour. So we'll have updates on the show coming later next week. And for me, Big Bird Offie, signing off. I'm out of here. Everybody have a good weekend.